Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Among the lonely waiters, tooth grinder Morgan, still rugged from his 5-hour delay, was striking, the travel's turmoil evident across his stubbly cheeks and ruffled hair. A mere 500 miles home, the thought of his suitcase missing was almost absurd, and yet, as the empty luggage carousel rotated itself at the airport, it seemed palpably assured. Tomorrow, his sister Emma awaited the gift of the groom, Morgan's presence. Wearing her old wedding suit on a whim of hope, her big brother would only just make the wake.
"I'm afraid we've had a situation. Several bags from your flight were reported missing. We believe they may have been taken." "Taken? You mean stolen?" Josiah's voice rose sharply. "The wedding is tomorrow afternoon." "I understand, sir. We've filed reports with airport security. In the meantime, you can fill out this claim form, and we can offer you access to our lost luggage items, things that have gone unclaimed for over 90 days. It's not much, but perhaps you might find something
suitable until we locate your belongings." 30 minutes later, Josiah found himself in a windowless room in the bowels of the airport, surrounded by shelves of abandoned suitcases and boxes. The airline representative unlocked the door with an apologetic smile. "Take whatever you need. Just fill out this form with what you borrow. If your luggage turns up, you can return these items. If not, they're yours to keep as part of your compensation." The door closed, leaving Josiah alone with the discarded belongings of countless travelers. He moved methodically through the shelves, searching for anything resembling a man's suit. Most of the clothing was wrinkled, outdated, or simply not his size. After 20 minutes of increasingly desperate searching, he slumped against a shelf. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Just checking you made it! Can't wait to see you tomorrow!" How could he tell her that he might not make it to the wedding after all? Emma had always been there for him, through their parents' divorce, through college, through his painful breakup last year. Missing her wedding was unthinkable. A glint of deep burgundy caught his eye from an open suitcase in the corner. Curious, he approached and pulled out what turned out to be an elegant, floor-length dress with delicate beading across the bodice. A bridesmaid dress, by the look of it, with the tags still attached. Beneath it lay a pair of matching heels, size 11, unusually large for women's shoes. His fingers lingered on the silky fabric. A strange feeling swept through him, one he recognized from deeply buried childhood memories. Times when he'd secretly tried on his mother's clothes when no one was home. The inexplicable comfort he'd felt before shame forced everything back into drawers and closets.
"Don't be ridiculous,"
he whispered to himself, nearly putting the dress back. Then his phone buzzed again with a photo of Emma in her wedding dress, captioned, "Final fitting. Tomorrow's the day." Her smile was radiant. He couldn't miss this. He wouldn't. 40 minutes later, Josiah stood in his hotel room staring at himself in the full-length mirror. The burgundy dress fit surprisingly well on his lean frame. He'd always been slender, with narrow shoulders and long legs. The hotel gift shop had provided basic makeup, and a quick trip to a nearby drugstore had yielded a simple auburn wig that framed his face softly. "Hello, Annie," he whispered to his reflection, using the feminine name he'd secretly called himself in private moments throughout his life. The woman in the mirror looked nervous, but undeniably elegant. The auburn hair brought out flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. With the right makeup and careful posture, he might actually pull this off, attend as Annie, a distant cousin perhaps, rather than miss his sister's wedding entirely. He practiced walking in the heels until well past midnight, his calves burning with the effort. He shaved meticulously, applied and reapplied makeup until his technique improved. By the time he fell into bed, exhausted, a plan had formed. He would explain everything to Emma in the morning and hope she understood. Morning sunlight streamed through the hotel curtains as Josiah, now fully transformed into Annie, made final adjustments to the auburn wig. The wedding was at 2:00, giving her just enough time to reach out to Emma privately beforehand. She texted, "Need to see you before the ceremony. Something happened. Room 412. 20 minutes later, a knock at the door sent Annie's heart racing. She opened it to find Emma, already in her bridal makeup, though still wearing a robe, her eyes widening in confusion. "I'm looking for my brother," Emma began, then stopped, recognition dawning. "Josiah?" Annie nodded, stepping back to let her sister in. "My luggage was stolen. Everything. My suit, shoes, everything. The airline had this unclaimed bridesmaid dress that actually fit, and I couldn't miss your wedding, Em." Emma circled her slowly, expression unreadable. "So you decided to come as Annie," she supplied, the name feeling right on her lips. "I thought I could say I'm a cousin or something. I know it's weird, and if you're uncomfortable, I understand. I can stay away from the ceremony." Emma remained silent, studying her brother's transformed appearance with such intensity that Annie began to fidget. Then, without warning, Emma stepped forward and took Annie's hands in hers. "You look beautiful," she said softly. "You're not mad?" "Why would I be mad?" Emma's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "You found a solution to make sure you could be at my wedding. That's all that matters." Annie felt her carefully applied makeup in danger as emotion tightened her throat. "There's something else." "What is it?" "This doesn't feel like a costume to me, Em. It feels right. In a way I've never been able to admit." Emma squeezed her hands. "I know." "You know? How could you possibly? I found your hidden clothes when we were teenagers. That time Mom thought someone broke in because her makeup was rearranged. I saw you putting everything back through the crack in your door." Emma smiled gently. "I never said anything because I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." The revelation left Annie speechless. All these years carrying a secret, and Emma had known, had silently supported her without judgment. "So," Emma continued pragmatically, "we need a slight adjustment to the plan. You're not going to be a mysterious cousin. You're going to be exactly who you are, my sibling and my bridesmaid." "What? The ceremony is in 3 hours!" "The burgundy matches our color scheme perfectly. It's fate." Emma was already texting someone. "We're down a bridesmaid anyway since Tanya's flight was canceled. You're taking her place." "But everyone will know." "Yes, they will. They'll know that my sibling cared enough to find a way to be in my wedding no matter what. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave." Emma looked up from her phone with fierce determination. "This is my day, and I want you standing beside me as your authentic self." 3 hours later, Annie stood with the other bridesmaids, her heart pounding beneath the burgundy dress. Emma had worked miracles, briefing the wedding party and immediate family in record time. The reactions had been mixed: surprise, confusion, a few uncomfortable glances, but Emma's unwavering support had silenced any open objections. Their mother had stared for a long moment before embracing Annie tightly. "I should have seen it," she'd whispered. "I should have known." Their father had been more reserved, but nodded stiffly. "It's Emma's day. We'll talk later." Now, as the music swelled and the procession began, Annie took her first public steps as herself. The burgundy dress swished elegantly around her ankles as she walked carefully in the matching heels, clutching her small bouquet of cream roses. Every eye in the church followed her, but it was the supportive smile from Emma waiting at the altar that gave her strength. The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion. When the bride and groom were pronounced husband and wife, Annie found herself crying freely, moved not just by her sister's marriage, but by her own unexpected journey. At the reception, Annie sat at the head table, still nervous but increasingly comfortable as the evening progressed. Several guests approached with awkward but well-meaning comments. Emma's new husband, Mark, had been surprisingly understanding, treating Annie with the same friendly respect he'd always shown Josiah. "May I have this dance?" The deep voice startled Annie from her thoughts. She looked up to find David, one of Mark's groomsmen, extending his hand. She had met him briefly as Josiah during the rehearsal dinner, before the luggage incident. I don't know how to dance like this," she admitted quietly. David smiled warmly.
"Neither do I. We can figure it out together."
On the dance floor, David maintained a respectful distance while guiding her through simple steps.
"Emma explained a little," he said. "That took courage, what you did today." "It wasn't courage. It was necessity. Sometimes necessity reveals our truest selves."
His eyes held no judgment, only genuine interest.
"The burgundy suits you, brings out something in your eyes."
The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time, Annie felt herself relaxing fully into her identity. When David excused himself later to fulfill his groomsman duties, Emma slid into the seat beside her. "So," Emma said, eyes twinkling, "David seems nice." Annie blushed. "He was just being polite." "He asked me for your number." "What?" "Emma, I haven't figured anything out yet. This is all happening so fast." Emma's expression softened. "I know, and you don't have to figure it all out tonight. But watching you today, Annie, I've never seen you so naturally yourself. The way you move, the way you smile, it's like meeting the person you were always meant to be." The sisters talked until the reception wound down, making plans for Annie to stay with Emma after the honeymoon. "We'll get you proper clothes, help you navigate everything," Emma promised. "You don't have to do this alone." Later that night, back in her hotel room, Annie carefully removed the auburn wig, placing it on the dresser. Even without it, looking at her reflection, she couldn't imagine returning to Josiah's life. Something had shifted irreversibly, a truth finally acknowledged after years of denial. Her phone pinged with a message from the airline. They'd recovered her stolen luggage. It would be delivered to the hotel by morning. Annie stared at the message, realizing that the man's suit inside that suitcase no longer belonged to the person she was becoming. She typed a reply thanking them, then began researching gender therapists in Emma's city. The burgundy dress hung carefully in the closet, a catalyst for change, an unexpected gift from circumstances that had seemed like disaster only 24 hours ago. 6 months later, Annie stepped out of her apartment wearing a simple green sundress that complemented her natural auburn hair, which had grown out several inches since she'd begun her transition. The burgundy bridesmaid dress hung preserved in her closet, a cherished reminder of the day everything changed. Emma waited in the car outside, ready for their weekly lunch date. These gatherings had become sacred time for the sisters, a chance to share triumphs and challenges as Annie navigated her new life. "You look gorgeous," Emma said as Annie slid into the passenger seat. "The hormone therapy is really making a difference." Annie smiled, touching her slightly softened jawline. "Slowly but surely. Dad called last night. And? He asked if I'd be coming for Thanksgiving this year." As Annie. Emma squeezed her hand. "That's progress." Their mother had adapted more quickly, even helping Annie select her first complete wardrobe. Their father had maintained distance initially, but had gradually begun reaching out with tentative efforts to understand. At the restaurant, David was waiting at their usual table. His friendship with Annie had evolved carefully over the months. Coffee dates, long walks, movie nights where they talked for hours afterward. He had been patient as she focused on her transition, never pushing for definitions or commitments. "I have news," Annie announced after they ordered. "I got the job at the design firm." Emma squealed with delight while David reached across the table to take Annie's hand. "I knew you would! Your portfolio was incredible!" "I start next month as Annie Morgan. They never even knew Josiah." The name felt increasingly distant now, like a character she'd once played in a production that had finally closed. Each day as Annie felt more authentic, more aligned with the person she'd always sensed beneath the surface. After lunch, David walked with her through the park while Emma headed to a prenatal appointment. She was 4 months pregnant and already planning how her child would know Annie only as their beloved aunt.
"I have something for you,"
David said, stopping beside the fountain. He pulled out a small jewelry box. Annie's eyes widened. "David,
"It's not what you think."
He smiled, opening the box to reveal a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a burgundy dress. "Custom made to commemorate your courage that day." Tears filled Annie's eyes as he fastened it around her neck. The pendant rested just below her collarbone, catching the sunlight.
"You once told me that necessity revealed your true self,"
he said softly.
"I'm grateful every day for that stolen luggage."
Annie laughed through her tears. Who would have thought a travel disaster would change everything?
"Some disasters turn out to be doorways."
His fingers lingered on the necklace.
"No pressure, but I'd very much like to kiss you right now."
Their first kiss was gentle, a promise of possibilities neither of them could have imagined a year ago. As they continued their walk, hand in hand, Annie realized how far she'd come from that desperate moment in the lost luggage room. That evening, she hung the green sundress beside the burgundy gown, running her fingers over both fabrics. One represented her beginning, the other her continuing journey. Her phone chimed with a text from Emma, an ultrasound picture with the caption, "Your niece says hi." Annie sat on her bed, overwhelmed with gratitude. The path ahead would still hold challenges. There were colleagues who would need to adjust, extended family members who might never fully understand, and her own ongoing journey of physical and emotional change. But she had found her truth, and with it, a support system she never knew was waiting. She picked up her phone and changed her social media profile picture to a recent one of herself with her natural auburn hair catching the light, finally ready to share her authentic self with the wider world. Within minutes, supportive messages began flooding in. Friends who had suspected, acquaintances offering encouragement, even a few people sharing their own similar journeys. A year passed, marked by milestones both significant and small. Annie's voice softened through therapy, her features gradually transforming with continued hormone treatment. She had legally changed her name, updated her identification, and become Aunt Annie to Emma's baby girl, Sophia. On the anniversary of the wedding, Emma hosted a small dinner party. Annie arrived wearing a new dress, her auburn hair now reaching past her shoulders, styled in loose waves. David accompanied her, their relationship having deepened into something neither rushed nor tentative, but solid and nurturing. "To lost luggage," Emma toasted, raising her glass. Everyone laughed, even their father, who had made remarkable progress in accepting his daughter, Annie. "And to found selves," Annie added softly. Later, as they looked through wedding photos where Annie stood proudly in that burgundy dress, Emma leaned close. "Do you ever miss anything about being Josiah?" Annie considered the question seriously. "I miss the simplicity of privilege, moving through the world without having to explain or justify my existence." She smoothed her dress over her knees. "But I don't miss the disconnect, the constant feeling of playing a role that never fit. I never knew how exhausting that was until I stopped doing it." Their mother joined them, presenting Annie with a small box. "I found this while cleaning out the attic. I think you should have it now." Inside lay a child's bracelet of colorful beads. Annie recognized it instantly. She had made it at summer camp when she was 8, had cried when her parents insisted it was too girly for her to wear. "You kept it all this time?" Her mother nodded, eyes glistening. "I think part of me always knew. I just didn't have the words or understanding." She clasped Annie's hand. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see you." That night, in the quiet of her apartment, Annie added the childhood bracelet to her jewelry box. Beside it lay the silver dress pendant from David, her new driver's license with the name Annie Morgan, and a small piece of burgundy fabric she'd saved when the dress needed hemming. Her journey had begun with a desperate solution to a travel mishap, but it had revealed the truth she'd carried her entire life. Annie touched the silver pendant at her throat, thinking about the strange, winding paths that lead people home to themselves. Tomorrow she would meet with a surgeon to discuss the next phase of her transition. David would accompany her, continuing to stand by her side through each step. Emma had already promised to help during recovery, and even their father had awkwardly offered his guest room if she needed a quiet place to heal. The burgundy dress still hung in her closet, a reminder not just of her sister's wedding, but of the moment Annie had first stepped fully into the light. What had seemed like a temporary disguise had instead revealed her most authentic self. She turned off the lights and closed her eyes, grateful for stolen luggage and sisters who see the truth, for burgundy dresses and second chances, for the courage born of necessity and the joy of finally becoming herself. Outside, the city hummed with life as Annie drifted to sleep, no longer dwelling in the shadows of who she was supposed to be, but resting peacefully in the knowledge of who she truly was. A woman with auburn hair and a burgundy dress who had found her way home. 2 years after the wedding, Annie stood before another mirror in another hotel room, adjusting a different dress, a cream-colored one with delicate lace detailing. Her auburn hair, now grown long and lustrous, was styled in an elegant updo with a few soft tendrils framing her face. Emma bustled around her, making tiny adjustments to the dress. "Stop fidgeting! You're going to mess up what took the makeup artist 2 hours to perfect." "I can't help it," Annie replied, her voice now naturally settled into its feminine register after years of voice training. "I never thought this day would come." "Well, it has." Emma stepped back to survey her handiwork. "David won't know what hit him." The journey to this day had been filled with both challenges and triumphs. Annie had completed her medical transition, finding peace in a body that finally matched her identity. Her design career had flourished, earning her recognition in the industry. And David had proposed 6 months ago, during a quiet dinner at the restaurant where they had shared their first real date. A knock at the door announced their mother's arrival. She entered carrying a small velvet box. "Something borrowed," she explained, opening it to reveal a pair of pearl earrings. "I wore these at my wedding. Your grandmother wore them at hers." "Mom," Annie's eyes filled with tears. "Don't cry! The makeup!" Emma frantically waved her hands. Their mother carefully fastened the earrings to Annie's ears, then stepped back to look at her daughter. "Perfect." Another knock, and their father entered, more gray at his temples than 2 years ago, but standing straight and proud in his tuxedo. His journey to acceptance had been the slowest, but in the end, his love had proven stronger than his confusion.
"It's time,"
he said, offering his arm.
"Are you ready?"
Annie took a last look in the mirror, at the woman she had always been, now visible to everyone. "Yes," she said. "I've been ready my whole life." The ceremony was held in a garden overlooking the bay, the same spot where Emma had married Mark 3 years earlier. As Annie walked down the aisle on her father's arm, she caught sight of the burgundy dress. Emma wore it now, having insisted on the symbolism of the garment that had changed both their lives. David waited at the altar, his eyes never leaving Annie as she approached. When her father placed her hand in David's, he whispered, "Take care of my daughter."
"Always,"
David promised. Their vows were personal, reflecting the unique path that had brought them together. David spoke of loving Annie for her courage and authenticity, for the woman who had emerged that day in Burgundy and continued to bloom ever since. Annie promised to cherish the man who had seen her true self from the very beginning, who had offered friendship first and allowed love to grow in its own time. At the reception, surrounded by friends and family who celebrated not just their marriage, but the journey that made it possible, Annie found herself overwhelmed with gratitude. Her niece, Sophia, now a toddler, danced around in her flower girl dress, occasionally touching Annie's cream gown with wonder. "Aunt Annie Princess," she declared solemnly. Later, during their first dance, David held her close. "Happy?" "Beyond words," she replied, her auburn hair catching the light as they turned. In a quiet moment, Annie slipped away to find Emma, who was watching the celebration with a content smile. "Thank you," Annie said simply. "For what?" "For seeing me. For making room for me at your wedding when I showed up in that burgundy dress. For everything that followed." Emma hugged her tightly. "That's what sisters do." As the evening drew to a close, Annie and David prepared to leave for their honeymoon. She had changed into a simpler traveling dress, but kept her hair styled in the elegant updo. Standing on the steps of the venue, she tossed her bouquet into the crowd of well-wishers. It was caught by a young woman who had recently begun her own transition, whom Annie had been mentoring. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present, one journey continuing, another beginning. In the car heading to the airport, David took her hand. "I've been thinking about that lost luggage." "What about it?" "They never did find out who took it, did they?" Annie shook her head. The airline eventually just processed it as permanently lost. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if your suitcase hadn't been stolen? If you'd shown up to Emma's wedding as Josiah in that suit?" Annie gazed out at the passing city lights, considering the question. I think the truth would have found another way out eventually, but I'm grateful it happened when it did. How it did. She touched the silver dress pendant she still wore, now alongside her wedding ring. Some thief looking for valuables had no idea they were stealing a disguise and returning a person. David lifted her hand to his lips. To necessity revealing truth. And to burgundy dresses, Annie added with a smile. That turned out to be exactly the right fit. As they drove toward their future together, Annie thought about the long, winding road that had led her here. From a desperate moment in an airport lost luggage room to a woman fully herself, loved for exactly who she was. The burgundy dress that had once been her only option had become the beginning of everything she'd never dared to hope for. Family who saw her, love that accepted her, and a life that finally felt like coming home.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!